With us is Mr. Behnam Taleblu, a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies in Washington. Good evening to you from Tel Aviv.
Pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
Well, this new crisis in Ukraine, did this change the whole game?
You know, unfortunately, it doesn't seem like Washington, at the moment at least, is drawing lessons about Russian intentions or about the inability or basically the inability of Russia or other great powers to compartmentalize some of their strategic competition with Washington. So far, the U.S. continues to work through the remaining members of the P5+1 mechanism, but I think this really should be a wake-up call. Russia's invasion of Ukraine should be a wake-up call.
Well, in what way?
Perhaps Washington would realize that given the number of independent and bilateral Iranian and Russian consultations, the fact that the Russian ambassador in Vienna has been one of the most outspoken ones about the importance of restoring the deal, the fact that the Russians, allegedly with American cognizance, had floated an interim deal proposal to the Iranians earlier in January of 2022, as of course the fact that the Russians will be one of the major beneficiaries of the lifting of sanctions on Iran. This really should be a wake-up call for Washington that it cannot afford to work through partners like Moscow, who act the way they do in Ukraine to try to rein in the world's foremost state sponsor of terrorism, Iran, from acquiring or producing the world's most dangerous weapons, which are nuclear weapons.
So what happens to the prospects of achieving a deal?
Well, so far on the diplomatic front, you know, the ball remains in Khamenei's court. Khamenei is Iran's supreme leader. He's the most important person in that political system. And thus far, he is continuing to drive a pretty hard bargain through his negotiator, Bagheri Khani, in Vienna. Ultimately, there has been reports that there is some kind of a floated restoration deal package, about a 20-page document trying to talk about how both sides could come back into compliance with that 2015 deal. But Khamenei hasn't fully authorized yet or pulled the trigger. And if past this prologue here, the Iranians will be looking for more concessions very late in the game, just as they did in 2015.
Would you say that the Iranians got more confidence now?
Unfortunately, over the past year and a half, the Iranians have several reasons to be more confident, and that confidence will lead them to drive a much harder line. The lack of significant pushback or the lack of deterrence to the activities of their proxies in the region. You've seen the escalation of long-range strike capability attacks against the UAE. That's something new. That's something to take into account. The continued pressure against Israel by way of cyber attacks and proxies, as well as, of course, the fact that its significant nuclear escalation, which is irreversible, has not really been challenged by Washington through the diplomatic process of the IAEA. The West has not even censured Iran for its significant nuclear advances. So Iran is taking all of this in and then looking at Afghanistan, looking at Ukraine, drawing impressions about American resolve, and then doubling down as it has been.
Mr. Ben Taleblu, I thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.